I'm Reg.
And on this podcast, we will be focusing on the Weird War Tales comic book series published by DC Comics from 1971 to 1983. On this episode in particular, we are going to be diving into Weird War Tales number 56. But first, Rich has some retroactive history for you.
As a humorous sidebar to the Star Trek Road Warriors episode, out of a clear blue sky one day, I decided to go back and watch the DS9 episode Trials and Tribulations to see if I could see the coffee stain on Leonard Nimoy's uniform that is now visible on high-def TV that wasn't visible before, or if they digitally cleaned it up. And hey, you can see it! And while listening to that episode, I was surprised to hear that I never actually named the Civil War Medal of Honor awardee buried in Ticonderoga. So to Sergeant Lester Hack, my apologies. And as an additional humorous sidebar to the Star Trek Road Warriors episode, the aforementioned Batmobile was up and running around for Ticonderoga weekend. So it's running, folks. It's running. Max is scheduling his comeback appointment already.
They'll be seeing me.
Yeah. Max has mentioned his love for artist Herb Trimpe a few times on the show, so I decided to check to see if he ever appears in the pages of WWT. Unfortunately, just like Jack Kirby, Trimpe's work never appears in this title. I met him at a con and got 3 books signed: The Further Adventures of Indiana Jones 23 with Mike Golden, G.I. Joe Special Missions #1 with Larry Hama, and The Nam 75. The Air Force vet served in Vietnam as a weatherman and died in 2015 at the age of 75. He's interred at Hillside Cemetery in Cortlandt Manor, New York. His Find a Grave page had no visitation flowers on it, so I was the first. Hillside Cemetery isn't too far away from West Point, so maybe I'll be able to pay my respects in person someday, and we can add him to our honorary ranks with Rod Serling, Joe Sinnott, and Joe Simon. Or I can stop by my way to the home of Franklin Delano Roosevelt Natural Historic Site at Hyde Park on Memorial Day weekend and render honors then, which I did. Happy birthday, Max. No surprise episode this time, but I think this is a neat gift. Steve and I found the marker pretty fast once I figured out our location in the cemetery. Someone had hung up one of those small, fluttering yard banners at his marker with the Incredible Hulk on it. And there's also a Hulk action figure propped up. The photo on his Find a Grave page shows them. He's buried with his younger brother, Michael, who's also a vet, and his parents. Needless to say, photos on the album. Max, photos on the way once we start recording. Welcome to our ranks, Mr. Trimpe. And as a sidebar to that, I then went back to Find a Grave and put in profile edit requests to acknowledge all the military veterans of WWT that had not already been recognized as such. As of this recording, Herb Trimpe, George Evans, Alex Toth, Vince Coletta, Dick Ayers, Jerry Grandinetti, Joe Giello, Ross Andrew, Joe Kubert, and John Albano's vet requests had been approved. So there you go, Max.
It was just Herb Trimpe's anniversary of his birthday recently too, so good freaking timing, man.
Yeah,
that's awesome.
I know. That's the only thing, because I like doing this stuff on the show, on the Facebook page, creator remembrances and everything. And let me see here. Herb was born May 26th and he died April 13th. Yeah, so his birthday was like 5 days ago. So we got to wait about a year for it to come around again before we could do the remembrance on the show. But
he worked on the Phantom Eagle. That's a war book, and the guy has a code name. That's weird enough. I say we put him in.
I agree. Well, he's an honorary creator now. He met the criteria. Met him. Got some crap signed. Been to his grave. And as an odd coincidence, every single one of the honorary creators, they're all vets, all of them. That's not intended to be a criteria, but it's by accident turned into one.
Yeah, well, creators of a certain age, like, and for you, Herb Trimpe, which I've probably mentioned before, but hey, you brought him up. His favorite thing to draw was airplanes. He'd take any excuse he could to draw any aircraft, and he owned at least one. And one of the coolest pictures of Flo Steinberg, the woman who carried early Marvel Comics office on her back, like one of the coolest pictures of her is her sitting in the pilot's seat in the cockpit of one of his planes with her thumb up and her flight helmet on, ready to go before Herb took her up for a flight. So it like right there, the guy had a pilot's license, owned at least one. I think it was. I don't know if it wasn't a biplane, but I'm not good on that stuff. But you search Flo Steinberg and there's a picture of her with her thumb up, ready to take off, and that is in Herb Trimpe's plane. So hey, I better shut up now.
Yeah, when we were on our way down, there was about an hour south of Hyde Park, and we took the Taconic Parkway. We went right past all the signs for Mahopac, and I know you have history from that neck of the woods, so it's pretty close to the part of downstate New York that you used to call home for a little while. So, anywho, on to the show. Intel report: The Sons of Liberty, a 180-page graphic novel released by Random House in 2010. Script by Alexander and Joseph Lagos, art by Steve Walker. From runaway slaves to revolutionary superheroes, The Sons of Liberty follows the adventures of Graham and Brody as they become electrically charged masked vigilantes during the time of the American Revolution. Not only must they face the challenges of war, slavery, and the birth of a nation, they must overcome dangerous villains as powerful as they are. This was followed up the next year by Sons of Liberty: Death and Taxes. And there should have been a third book, Join or Die, that I even saw preview art for, but as far as I can tell, it was never released. Pretty good stuff. Cover detail: art by first and last timer Al Milgrom, 35 cents. Weird War Tales is green on white. On a dark and foggy night in a barren forest, a slack-jawed and wide-eyed American World War I motorcyclist fires 3 rounds from his .45 behind him at a pursuing German motorcyclist. The German's body is headless, and he has just thrown his flaming skull, red-eyed and laughing at the American. The skull is wearing a picklehop helmet with a large golden eagle on it and is about to strike. A banner at the bottom of the cover reads, The Headless Courier. Cover date, October 1977. Date of release, July 5th, 1977. Killjoy, largely reserved for the cover story inside, but I will say the large golden eagle on the German's helmet is a bit ornate for frontline usage. Comments and commendations, Ghost Rider, anyone? I commented on this cover when we were discussing issue 19 back in February 2022 due to its skeletons on motorcycles theme. A rare World War I cover. Not counting mixed covers, this is only the 4th Great War cover we've seen, and only the 2nd one showing ground action. The cover date is October, so certainly there's a nod to Halloween and the classic Headless Horseman tale of Sleepy Hollow going on. Barren trees at night. It's a pretty dark cover except for the flaming head in the middle that draws your eyes right in. I got Milgram's signature on a couple of books at Terrificon a couple years ago, Wolverine and a Sergeant Rock. If I'd known about this book, I'd have brought it along for show content. Next time. I don't know if I was more surprised to see him appear here at all, or if it was that this was his only time. For a one and done, this is a damn good showing.
Yeah, I mean, most people associate Milgram with Marvel, so I'm not sure like what his deal was with his contracts or what. I haven't looked into his career that deeply, but most of my experience with Milgram as an artist was I figured he was a Marvel house guy, so I was kind of surprised to see him here too. But seeing him here, I gotta say, you could hardly ask for a more fitting cover image for this series than this one, folks. As Rich mentioned, even for a series where it's Halloween every day, this cover gives off some powerful trick-or-treat vibes, even if, as mentioned, it hit the stands on July 5th. I mean, it wasn't going to get pulled until early October cover date, so they were definitely counting on that synergy at the tail end of its shelf life. I've told anyone who'll stand still long enough that I've always been a big fan of Al Milgram's work. He's one of those people who seems to get slagged on by fans, and I've never understood why. Sure, he's not among the industry's flashiest artists, but his storytelling has always been top notch. His actual drawing skills are superior to a lot of other fan favorites I could mention. And besides, this cover is dynamic as all get out, too. There's background interaction with the foreground, a proper setting in use to provide that sense of depth in which the interaction takes place. The background trees being silhouetted while the tree up front is fully colored also helps the illusion of death, and the misty purple nighttime atmosphere sets the mood perfectly. I suppose some might knock Milgram's use of motion lines behind our fleeing foot soldier up front, but I feel it helps sell the sheer panicked speed of his retreat. And besides, even the title has speed lines in it. And speaking of panic, the terrified look on the American's face is practically Sal Buscema-like in its expressiveness. And that earns major points with me right there. Love it. Great cover. Let's see how things proceeded in the first story here.
The Headless Courier. 10 pages, script by Arnold Drake, art by Rick Estrada. It's the cover story, as already spoiled, although you will see in reverse. Kinda. They do this a lot. World War I. France. German mortar fire chases an American motorcyclist across the countryside. The German gunners think the American is trapped as he approaches a chasm, but Barney Sladen guns his engine and jumps over the gap. A German machine gun truck is waiting and picks up the pursuit. Sladen can't outrun the truck, so he violently slaloms through a thick woods where the Germans can't pursue. Arriving at his destination as rain begins to fall, he shuts off his engine and awaits his target, Roche. In his mind, he returns to a sunny day at a county fair in Nebraska before the war. Sladen and Roche were two competing daredevil motorcyclists competing for a $1,000 prize. Gesturing to the crowd, Roche had asked, "You know why they have come, eh, Sladen? They come to see us spill our guts on the track. We are the best, you and me, but even to us it happens one day if we keep pushing each other. But if we make a deal, one time you win, next time me. And we split the cash, right? Play it safe, still make a buck? No deal, Roche. You take your chances, I'll take mine. Romantic fool. The crowd will drink your blood one day." Later, Sladen successfully landed a jump over 12 flaming barrels, a new record. Roche was next, but he miscalculated and tumbled into the flames. Sladen went to visit Roche in the hospital, but the heavily bandaged German rejected him. "I don't want your sympathy. You want to give me a present? Give me back half my face." Years pass. The U.S. enters the war and Sladen enters the Army. Reporting to headquarters, Sladen was shocked to be told that the Army didn't want him to be a courier, but rather to kill one. All German communications in Valley-Fontaine had been cut by the Americans, but a lone German motorcyclist with half a face kept slipping through the lines every night at 11. It had to be Roche. Every night, Sladen patrolled the front, searching for his German counterpart. Finally, he came across another cyclist and roared down the road to engage. At the last second, a tinny ringing sound from the bell on the bicycle's handlebars turned him aside and he wiped out. "Why didn't you carry a torch, you double-dyed dunderhead?" he exclaimed as he picked himself up and his cycle off the ground. "You startled to hear a woman reply. Because, Monsieur Yankee, I do not wish to be shot by their snipers. Or yours." Flair was the nurse who rode her bike across the countryside, tending to the civilian medical needs. They went to a basement cafe and made up over wine and dancing. But the next night, Sladen went out again, hunting for Roche. And this time he found him. Roche took off with Sladen in pursuit. They were competing again, but this time the prize was life. Roche was very good, but Sladen was better, and the American closed the distance. But the crafty German dumped a can of oil on the ground behind him. Sladen somehow fought his slipping and skidding machine through the oily patch, but Roche had increased his lead, and he had a surprise waiting for the American. He ducked under the wire that crossed the road at neck height, strung between two trees, then doubled back to watch from a nearby hill. but Fleur had heard Sladen's motorcycle from a nearby side road and hurried to meet him, ringing her bell as her cloak flowed in a slipstream. In the dark, she never saw Roche's booby trap and was decapitated. Roche laughed as he rode off, believing Fleur to be Sladen. Sladen was horrified by the gruesome scene he discovered. The dripping rain brings Sladen back to the present as he fondles his .45 and gazes at his watch. Shoot to kill, they said. And I will. But first I'm going to drive you stark raving mad. Sladen had gotten to know Roche well enough to anticipate his routes, and at 11 o'clock on the dot, the German came roaring down the road. Swiftly, Sladen pulls his jacket over his head and peers through two narrow eye slits. Roche is about to meet Sladen's headless ghost. Seeing Sladen's headless body giggling loudly as it pursues him, indeed drives Roche into a panic. Unable to escape, he throws a potato masher over his shoulder in an attempt to drive the specter away, and succeeds beyond his wildest hopes. The blast throws Sladen off his motorcycle and renders him unconscious. Amused by this new turn of events, Roche ties Sladen between two trees and strings a noose around his head before he comes to. You pretended to be a headless ghost. Now I shall make your drama come true by tying the noose to my cycle. Sladen is horrified at his pending doom, but before Roche can tie the rope to his cycle, another headless apparition appears. It's that of a woman with a flowing cape and ringing the bell on the handlebars of her bicycle. The German at first thinks it's another trick, but his Luger fire doesn't stop the oncoming vision. Panic-stricken, he guns his cycle and roars off, but the woman on a bicycle, still ringing her bell, gains on him. In his terror, he doesn't see the chasm that Sladen had jumped earlier and tumbles down it to his death. 20 years later, in a veterans hospital in San Francisco, Sladen is a gray-haired catatonic, gazing out a window from a wheelchair. He only speaks every night at 11 o'clock as he grips invisible handlebars. I'm coming for you, Roche. I'm coming for you. Killjoy. Just like I explained the Nazi armband and the field line to newer listeners in our last episode of WWT, I will explain the classic spiked World War I German helmet here. It's called a Pickelhaube. Like the swastika armband in World War II, it's a handy way to ID a World War I German in comics, granted, but the spikes often showed over the tops of the trenches and gave the Allied troops on the other side of no man's land a great aiming point. By September of 1915, helmets with detachable spikes were issued for frontline use, and the Pickelhaube was replaced entirely with the classic coal scuttle Stahlhelm in 1916. This story more than likely takes place in 1918 when full U.S. involvement in the war was occurring. That being said, it's entirely possible the German courier on the cover got killed in the winter of 1914, and there's absolutely nothing wrong there.
All right. Well, comments and commendations. First off, this occurred to me while you were reading your script for the plot. The tie to Ghost Rider deepens because Sladen and Roche were daredevil riders, like in a show, just like Johnny Blaze, the first Ghost Rider. So it's even the deeper tie to the Ghost Rider illusions that the cover gave us to begin with. So I didn't even catch that the first time reading it through until we just went back through the plot here. So yeah, Ghost Rider was definitely on somebody's mind, I think, because he had debuted by now, I believe. But anyway, as you could tell, people, my CNCs for this episode turned out a little differently than usual. But they got off to a great start here regardless. I was pleasantly surprised to see the term Knights Errant in the intro text, for starters. From the hallowed bastion of unassailable truth that is Wikipedia, a knight errant is defined as a figure of medieval chivalric romance literature. The adjective errant, meaning wandering, roving, indicates how the knight errant would wander the land in search of adventures to prove his chivalric virtues. Either in knightly duels, and I'm not going to say that French word there from Wikipedia, Rich can handle that, or in some other pursuit of courtly love. The knight-errant is a character who has broken away from the world of his origin in order to go off on his own to right wrongs or to test and assert his own ideals. In medieval Europe, knight-errantry existed in literature, though fictional works from this time often were presented as non-fiction. Examples of the knight-errant in literature vary as widely as Sir Gawain from Arthurian tales to Don Quixote, who is a Weird War Tales luminary, as you may remember, to modern examples such as the protagonist of Cormac McCarthy's novel All the Pretty Horses. John Grady Cole from that book is said to be based specifically on Sir Gawain. And then you get the Hedge Knights from A Song of Ice and Fire, which most people know as A Game of Thrones, who travel the length and breadth of the fictional continent of Westeros looking for gainful employment. And their name comes from the propensity to sleep out in the open air, or in forests when they cannot afford lodging. Now, I'm not sure how much of that Martin grabbed from pre-existing folklore, because I've heard the term hedge knights for a long time. But again, that book series is older than you think, so I don't know which came first. In this intro to this comic book story, getting back to those pages, the term seems to be used to refer more to soldiers with increased personal mobility, granted by, horses, elephants, fighter planes, or, in this issue specifically, motorcycles, wandering, freewheeling agents doing their definition of good across the land. As for the story in this comic book itself, focusing even further back into what we're supposed to be talking about here, let's say I was a pretty big fan. You all know I'm a fan of the sometimes maligned Rick Estrada's work, and this is some of my favorite work of his that we've covered yet. There's some really strong Joe Staton, Frank Robbins vibes sprinkled into the art throughout these pages, and those are just two more of my all-time favorite pros that ever picked up a pencil. As for the writing, which I gotta admit I often neglect a bit in these parts of the show, I want to call out the use of the, yes, outdated and racist term, bug-eyed heinies on page 2, which was worth a chuckle for me when I came across it. Page 2, panel 1 was where that appeared. And in panel 2 of that same page, the transition between the caption, out of the frying pan, into the thought balloon of machine gun truck, also got a chuckle out of me. On page 5, the term that Rich let y'all in on in the synopsis up top, double-dyed dunderhead, amused me enough to look it up. So double-dyed, according to dictionary.com, means of an item of clothing dyed twice in order to give it a very deep color, of a person thoroughly imbued with a particular quality, as in a double-dyed hypocrite. It's easy to figure out in context, but it was still nice to learn the origins of the term came from actually dyeing something, to change its color. I have no idea how Sladen survived that grenade, but it was worth it for the final shot of him at the window in the hospital at the end, where I imagined he was making vroom vroom noises to go with his phantom handlebars. So that's my CNC.
That was just a deflection. This is the third time Estrada's art has appeared in the show, and the second time for WWT. I am on record saying that his style is too cartoony for my taste, and I'm not a big fan. That being said, this is easily his best work I have seen so far. Washington Irving would have given a tip of the cap for how Drake's brought his story to the 20th century. 20 years? Looks like Sladen aged about 50, and he's nuts to boot. I haven't seen a victorious good guy get hosed this badly in this book since the reprint issues. I know you were about to be decapitated before the girl you were sweet on, before she had her head torn from her off by piano wire, came running to the rescue like the undead cavalry she was, but man up, mister. And speaking of which, that panel, page 7, panel 3, that scene had to be in full silhouette. Oh, Mr. Comics Code Authority. Again, Estrada won me over with this one. I can pick a panel from every page. I won't, but page 2, panel 3, the German gun truck screeching to a halt outside the stand of trees as Sladen escapes. Page 3, panel 2, the crowded carnival scene. Page 5, panel 5, the crowded cafe scene. Page 6, panel 5, the shadows as Sladen fights his bite through Roche's oil slick. Page 9, panel 5 of Roche firing at the headless floor is straight out of a horror comic. And the last panel of the story of the insane Sladen with the colors and rings surrounding the wall clock as it strikes 11 is the perfect ending. Total win. the next story is going to have its hands full to beat it.
And we'll find out if that's true in a second. But I tried to avoid a bunch of art spotlights to drag out my CNC even further. But I'm looking at the comic right now, and I just got to say that opening splash panel is like, that's like made for me. Yeah, I loved every panel in this story, but you look at that page, like the action with the guy coming forward, all the cool sound effects, just the design of the action flowing back to the soldiers watching him drive away, the cool host, the logo that looks like it just zipped to the front, like it's, like the Headless Courier, up to the front of the page. Just perfect. I loved it. So anyway, I snuck in an art spotlight there. Haha. So let's find out if this next story does what it needs to do here. It is called The Blue and the Grave. It's 7 pages long. Script is by Arnold Drake again. Pencils by longtime favorite of the show, Bill Drought. Inks by a second, first, and last timer to this series, Steve Mitchell. Synopsis goes like this. 1865. Confederate Captain Jeff Strom's troops successfully break contact from Union forces and retreat. Hours later, he bids his men farewell. "I must leave you now, men. The war is lost, but not the memory of our sacrifices for freedom and decency." His plantation is only 2 miles away, and he had to defend his own home now. Every other time he had returned home on leave, the reception had been a grand and noisy affair. But now, only his wife Sylvia runs out to greet him. She's exhausted from boiling laundry all day. Their 120 hands on the property haven't been working much since old Ben had died and his son Charles became field boss. He goes inside to wash up and beat the dust off his uniform, and swears to beat something else into that lazy Charles. That night, Strom approaches the warehouse. He's decided to be firm but understanding to the field hands. After all, he's going to need them to defend the place against the Yankees. Strom hears a weird chant coming from inside the building and warily cracks the door open. Some sort of heathen ritual is going on, with the slaves chanting and clapping. Granny is pouring what appears to be blood on the chest of Charles. "We're heading north now," Charles exclaims. "Them that stays will get beat. Count of the rest of us leaving. Mr. Lincoln's emancipation don't mean nothing to the captain." Strom is enraged at the pending desertion, but before he can act, he is startled by the appearance of a familiar face. "It's Ben! Old Ben! Alive!" Ben. Old Ben. That's a name I've not heard in a long, long time. Before Strom can grab the old man, 2 small black hands encircle his thigh. Strom angrily swats the slave child away. "Let go of me, boy!" "Oh, boy, oh God. Get your filthy hands off or I'll kill you!" Charles bursts from the warehouse and punches Strom across the face. "You don't kill no little boy, Captain. You don't hurt nobody no more." Granny begs her grandson to run for his skin, but Charles refuses. "I do not run. I am a man, not a dog. I will stand and..." Strom pulls his Colt from his holster and shoots Charles in the back, killing him. "You will pay for this, white devil!" Granny cries, holding the body of her grandson. "I put the curse of Ujiba on you forever!" Strom grabs her by the wrist. "Shut your mouth! He attacked me! A slave attacking his master is a hanging offense. Now tell me how come I saw old Ben, your son, alive? Talk!" Granny protests, claiming Ben had been on the ground for months. But Strom brutally twists her arm until she confesses. "The brew! Kombucha brew! Returned him from the dead! Ben is Zuvembies!" Strom is stunned. The idea of a living dead man brew brings trembling joy to him. "I can turn this war around. Brew me a gallon of this Kombucha by dawn. I'm going back to the battlefield and raise me a new army." The next morning, a Union unit is taking care of their casualties from the previous day's skirmish. when they noticed something odd in the field. A Confederate officer pouring a sickly green fluid down the throat of a rebel corpse. To Strom's delight, the corpse begins to stir. Can't speak, eh? But you can fight, can't you, boy? And you will! Again and again, Strom repeats the voodoo ritual until he has a unit of living dead men. Grabbing a Confederate banner, he leads them across the field toward the Union forces. Follow me, brave men, and remember, nothing can kill you again, before bursting into singing Dixie. But the Union men only saw Strom marching alone towards them. A demand that he halt was laughed away. Fire and be damned! This army cannot die! 2 soldiers fire and Strom falls. Major Cox drapes the banner over the body out of respect. Battle crazy. Losing does that to a lot of good men. That night, a full moon helps Granny and Ben find Strom on the battlefield. They believe him to be dead, but a bullet to the spine had paralyzed him. He was unable to speak or move. Ben carries Strom back to the warehouse. Ben actually is alive. His death and burial had been faked so Mrs. Strom would stop working them so hard. Since Captain Strom had believed in the power of the Kombucha brew, maybe it did work after all, even though Granny herself didn't believe in it. Pouring some of the foul liquid down Strom's throat, Granny is pleased to hear a heartbeat where she hadn't heard one before. Still unable to walk or talk, the slaves prop Strom up in a chair as Granny gloats. A celebration begins. He can sit there all his days and watch how happy freedom's gonna make us. They kept his existence a secret. Captain Strom, not Storm. I know this is a DC war book, but get it right. I mean, I struggled with that. I got to say, reading through the whole story, I kept having to go, it's not Storm? What? So, yeah, it's a weird name to pick. It's like you're daring us to get it wrong. So, Strom lived out his days as a frozen observer and a prisoner of the Weird War.
Killjoy and a Marvel Comics History Minute. No Killjoys lunge out at me except a coloring gaff on page 6, panels 3 and 4. The red and blue coloring of the Confederate banner magically swaps between panels. Now, that flag did exist. It was the battle flag for the Army of the Trans-Mississippi, which mostly fought west of the Mississippi River. And it was the last major Confederate command to surrender at war's end on May 26, 1865. Now, I did not know what a Zuvembie was, so I had to look this stuff up. It's a creature used by pulp writer Robert E. Howard in his short story Pigeons from Hell. Nice. Published in Weird Tales in 1938. In the 1970s, Marvel Comics used the term in place of zombie, which had been banned by the Comics Code Authority. Under the code, as we know, comic books in the late 20th century United States operated under many restrictions, mostly aimed at preventing horror elements from being used. This code became more lenient in 1971, but still prevented the use of certain terms such as zombie because they lacked the literary background of creatures such as vampires and werewolves, although not the use of zombies or zombie-like creatures. In order to circumvent this, Marvel Comics used the term Zuvembie in place of zombie in their comics. In 1989, the code was changed again, permitting the word zombie, and Marvel retired the term Zuvembie. In 1997, John Byrne used the word again briefly in Wonder Woman Annual Number 6, published by DC Comics. 2007, Deadpool, a character known for breaking the fourth wall, used the term alongside zombie in Cable and Deadpool number 48. These uses suggest that since its first appearance in Weird Tales, Zuvembie has become a term acknowledged by both major comic book companies, DC and Marvel, and that it is now seen as an esoteric reference to comic book cultural history. And in the story, the term is spelled without an E on the end.
Yeah, I got to say, I made a comment in the script to thank Rich for bringing up the Zuvembie thing. First thing it reminded me of was Marvel's use of the term Maggia, which, I just realized has some modern day connotations as well, but accidentally. sounds a little similar to something else, but it's Maggia for years and years because they couldn't mention the term mafia. And then that became something that was now a part of Marvel history. So long past when they were told, oh, you can use mafia if you want. They didn't for a long time. Like they had to pretend there were these two different organizations, the Mafia and a separate thing called the Maggia or the Maggia or whatever, however they pronounced it internally for a long time. Yeah, as Rich knows, he had to put up with that term in Punisher comics. It was in Spider-Man. It was everywhere for a long time. So it was funny to hear about the origins of Zuvembi, which I didn't know till I just listened to Rich's Killjoy here. I did not know that it was originated in a Robert E. Howard story, let alone one with such a cool title. I gotta find that one. They're all public domain, so I'm gonna find that one and read it. And what I was trying to look up earlier too, as you were talking, was there's a Marvel character named Simon Garth, Garth, and he was the living zombie. But I think they published that book as one of their Marvel magazines, the black and white mags that was on the stands. And those got to skip around the comics code because they were magazines and those had different standards. So I think they were publishing something called The Living Zombie. At the same time, in their regular Marvel comics, they were using Zuvembi all over the place. So hey, comics, people. All right, so I will cede the floor and let Rich begin our comments and commendations on the story.
Captain Strom's plan had merit except for one massive loophole. Your army can't die, but you sure can. The first thing everyone should do is shoot the guy leading the army of the dead and see what happens. If he really was leading them, guess that was the curse doing its thing. I'm sure Max will agree that Mitchell does a bang-up job on our skeletal narrator in Union garb. But I have to say my gag reflex fluttered a bit on panel 3 when Strom talked about freedom and decency on his way back home to his 120 slaves. It's been a while since we had a voodoo story in these pages. The old comics man bell rang a few times too. I liked all the detail in the ritual scene of page 3, panel 1, as well as the hit a kid, get hit back panels 4 and 5. All of page 4 is great too. The horror on Granny's face as Charles is shot, followed by the anger and pain as Strom forces the truth out of her. Except he actually didn't, did he? Quick thinking. The last panel on page 5 deserves a thorough gander also. I see 2 legs, an arm, and a freaking head blown off of the dead Rebs following Strom. I kind of have to wonder if the Freedom Train reference wasn't in part inspired to Drake by the 1975-76 American Freedom Train, which celebrated the United States bicentennial. The steam train had its own special red, white, and blue paint scheme and its own itinerary and route across the 48 contiguous states, stopping for visitors and displaying Americana and related historical artifacts. My parents took me to see it when it came through my area, which, since my dad is a huge steam train nerd, was not a hard sell. There are apparently plans to run a Freedom Train again in 2026, and I'll go if possible. Too bad this is the only time we see Mitchell in WWT, because I've been plenty glad to see him again. Drake is 2 for 2 also.
I will deny this to my grave, Rich, but yes, you were right. I loved this story's intro host panel. So there you go. All right. Keep it safe somewhere. Mitchell's inks, despite the number of times you are actually right, the number of times I admit it is much smaller. So Mitchell's inks bring a softer quality to Drought's pencils throughout this story. It kind of gives the proceedings more of a military romance comics look than Drought's usually somewhat grittier tone, and I kind of dig it. If these two have worked together before, I don't think they've gone for this particular effect before. Anyway, they hit the nail on the head here. Matching the often overly romanticized atmosphere of plantation life with the casual cruelty of actual plantation life, which segues very well into the sheer insanity of Strom's unhinged delusions on the battlefield. And the art is truly fantastic throughout this story, providing a capable counterpart to the opening tale in a very different style, but equally impressive. However, it's in the writing where this one kind of fell apart for me. If Strom had snapped hard enough to have such a prolonged hallucination that he was reviving fallen comrades one at a time into Zuvembification, and that they were all then following him into battle, that was not conveyed by anything in the previous pages. Although, I'll admit, listening to Rich's summation, this could have been the curse Granny was talking about. But that didn't really hit me reading it through the first time. I just thought, man, this guy really snapped, and didn't seem to have snapped that hard just one page ago. But it made, for me, reading it through the first time, again, it made the revelation of his delusion fall so flat that I thought I had missed a page or two somewhere. Also, if Granny could hear no heart thumping when she checked on her and her son checked on Strom's body on the battlefield, then how was Strom only paralyzed? I mean, you can hear if someone's heart is beating or not if you're out there in the quiet with your ear down to their chest. I didn't buy that. On top of that, there was no way that Granny was dumb enough to think that the Kombucha, or Kombucha, might actually have the power to revive the dead when, one, she knew it didn't, and two, Strom was obviously wrong about that. So her going, well, maybe it does have some power. That I didn't need her to say that. There's no way she would have thought that. She would have just been like, okay, he's alive, but he can't move. It would have worked just fine without having Granny buy into the Camacha's power. They could have just said, oh, he's still alive, but he can't move. I got an idea. You can see what they were aiming for here, and the art team rose to the challenge. But I feel like the page count requirements and maybe the need to make it more spooky at the end seemed to have made a mishmash of the plot right at the finish for me. But overall, I enjoyed it. So we're going to move on from that little bunch of rambling I just did and go to the next part of the show, which is the letters page of Weird War Tales, and that section is called APO Weird War Tales. For my spotlighted letter, I'm picking the one that opens the column from a guy named Jack Simpson, and it goes a little something like this. Dear Joe, I've grown rather accustomed to seeing Joe Kubert covers gracing the front of Weird War Tales, and I was expecting yet another of Mr. K's gorgeous renderings on issue number 53. But there was a new face on the WWT cover this time around, and regardless of what you put on the insides of the book, from now on, keep Jim Aparo on the outside. Sorry, buddy, that doesn't happen. His slick, smooth style gives the book a nice look, and after the avalanche of skulls in the background, threatening soldiers of various armies covers over the years, it's a nice change. This is not to say that I think you should neglect the book's innards for the covers. On the contrary, the inside of the book is more important than the cover. And you guys came through with 17 fabulous pages of story for Weird War Tales number 53. First, there was the Jack Harris, Juan Ortiz, Tex Blaisdell tale called Deadly Dominoes. True, there was no supernatural element in the story, but just try and tell me that it wasn't a weird story. True, again, the art was a little weak, in his opinion, but Jack's script more than made up for it. I'd like to see many more of this kind of story in the near future. Next came The Day After Doomsday by Paul Kupperberg, Jeff Acklin, and Bob Wyacek. While the first two names in the credits were unfamiliar to me, well, one of them is to me too, still to this day, I get the feeling that these two gents will go far. Finally, Jack Olek, Ernie Chua, Wayne Howard turned in the weakest story of the book. How dare you say that? With any reference to the name Wayne Howard, sir. Anyway, the only suggestion I can make for WWT is give us more book-length stories. Other than that, Joe, you're doing a bang-up job. So what else is new? On Weird War Tales. That came from Jack Simpson of no address given, San Jose, California 95103. And Joe responds, we have some novel lengths on the drawing board. The next one up, by Steve Englehart, concerns the Hindenburg disaster and will appear in WWT number 60. So keep your eyes peeled on these pages. Now, the reason I picked this one is just the mention of these people entering into, the lexicon here as newcomers, Paul Kupperberg and Steve Englehart, who to me were veterans in my eyes when I was growing up and really understanding the credits and things by the 80s. And here, these are the young new hawks coming in, cutting their teeth on Weird War Tales and whatnot. And also just the mention of a full-lengther concerning the Hindenburg coming up. I'm already looking forward to that one. So that letter actually got me psyched for a future episode of the show. So there's my letter.
Well, again, that's one of the neat things about doing this is these up and comers that get mentioned. Like Walt Simonson, his first professional work was in Weird War Tales, 10 or something like that. I'm like, sweet Jesus, in the early 70s. And the book that they're mentioning here, that Hindenburg, that one is obviously it's peeking its head up over the horizon. I'm using that comic as kind of like a place setter in my long box, and I vaguely remember this story. So I'm kind of looking forward to doing this one. So, so my letter is the very next letter. Dear Joe, I've never written to a comic book before, but I felt I had to comment on Weird War Tales number 53. Deadly Dominoes was the best story in the book. It had more action in the rest of the stories, and the death cycle was interesting because we never knew who or what was to come next. Juan Ortiz and Tex Blaisdell did a fine job showing the expressions on the faces of the characters. I liked the Day After Doomsday next, since it put us in the place of the character. Finally, something to die for. This story had nice artwork, but nowhere enough war action, except for the first few panels. Remind Mr. Olek that the word war does appear in the title. And yeah, Molly says, yeah, about that, yeah. I'm glad that Weird War Tales doesn't have any regular characters like the other war mags. With a regular character, you already know that he will live. And WWT characters live and die every issue because that's the way war is. Well, we all know that the Creature Commandos are about 50 or 60 episodes away, so hey, they're coming. And
Yeah,
that is
but they're not actually guaranteed a long life in comics either. Spoiler alert.
And that is brought to us by Steve Cooper, 3 Daisy Court, Nanuet, New York, 10954. And what do we do after we do our favorite letters? Why, we go on to our favorite ads. And this is yet again one of those issues where I had to flip through the book a couple of times because I either already picked the ad that talked to me or none of them did. Finally, a half-page Clark Bars ad showing 6 drawn candy bars got me. Clark Coconut, Clark Peanut Butter Log, Clark Crunchy Peanut Butter, Clark Zagnut, dark chocolate covered Clark Mint, and the old-fashioned just straight-up Clark Bar. Probably from watching the movie Beetlejuice, where the ghost lures a fly into his lair with a Zagnut bar, is probably what got me the hardest on this. And looking at this ad, it got me realizing that I hadn't seen any of these in a while. So, a hunting I went. The Clark Bar was manufactured in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania by the original family-owned business from 1917 until 1955. It was then manufactured by corporate owners until a series of sales and bankruptcies in the 1990s resulted in transfer of production to the Revere, Massachusetts-based New England Confectionery Company, or NECO. Following NECO's 2018 bankruptcy, the Clark Bar is now produced in Western Pennsylvania by the Altoona, PA-based Boyer Candy Company. As of 2021, production is still limited to Pittsburgh area specialty candy stores. That all being said, I saw Zagnut bars at Cracker Barrel recently for sale by Hershey's. So maybe Hershey bought the Zagnut bar specifically. I don't know. I just found it interesting to see that at Cracker Barrel. One neat thing about Cracker Barrel is that the gift shop has all kinds of just vintage candy, like stuff you haven't seen in forever. Or they have like the vintage wrappers on like the Hershey bars from like 1927 or something like that. Remember Chuckles? They sell them. I got my kid hooked on Chuckles. Thank you, Cracker Barrel. Yeah, so not a bad all. Not a bad ad. We're just from kicking into the old Wayback Machine and when all is said and done.
Oh, hell yeah. Now I want candy. My doctor said I should eat more candy. If they sell bottle caps, man, like Willy Wonka's bottle caps, then I'm going to start going into Cracker Barrels, man. Because I only have one place that I pick up bottle caps now. And that's there's some candy store up near the Green Mountains in New Hampshire that specifically they specialize in like nostalgic candies that are still being produced, and I can get my Willy Wonka's bottle caps there. But man, I don't want to go up there every time I want bottle caps. So that is good to know. All right, so for my spotlighted ads, and surprise, I've got two this time around. What do you know? The first up it's a house ad for a treasury-sized collection. It's number C-52 for people who follow the Treasury Cast and over on the Fire and Water Podcast Network. Hey, Rob and Shag. This particular collection, it features 3 superhero stories and 3 non-superhero tales. Half of the book features something other than spandex. Can you imagine? All right, so what the ad looks like is, again, full pager. At the top, it says, presenting the best of DC. And the word best is coming in like one of those TV movie specials back in our childhood where the after images are following the letters down into the foreground. And then you have 3 splash pages in 2 rows, so 6 splash pages below that of a Superman story, The Last Days of Superman, a Batman story, Night of the Reaper, The Flash in The Doorway to the Unknown, and then you've got the 3 non-superhero tales I mentioned, which the main reason I called this ad out is 2 of those 3 are from this show's favored genres, horror, with The Demon Within from House of Mystery 201, and war. It's Dirty Job from Our Army at War 241, which, as you know, Rich has in his house. He's got to. However, and if Rich has anything to say about that story, although he every time I say, hey, you remember that one? He's like, I have read 10,000 of these things. Why are you asking me? But for my real ad spotlight, I had to go with this extremely odd find. Again, it's not a full page ads, but it's darn close. And the text on the top says new true dimension with like a pseudo 3D vanishing point effect on the words true dimension. The most exciting new concept in years. And the center image is this multi-tiered frame with Superman bursting out of it, flying straight at you. Very Kurt Swan, but also Joe Kubert looking Superman. So probably something that his studio drew, because they drew a lot of these toy ads, or his studio, his students drew. But DC also had a big habit of redrawing Superman faces to look like a Kurt Swan Superman face, as Jack Kirby could tell you. So he's coming through the rubble out of that frame straight at you with the sound effect crash, and a bunch of rockstars kind of flying out of the frame with him. There's other toys they were advertising at the bottom, but I wanted to focus on this true dimension thing. I had to find out what one of these things looked like in real life, and lucky for me, eBay did not let me down. So there's going to be some pictures in the album. The concept here is the frame is very tall. There's stacked layers that get smaller as they go up, that you put these like cellophane looking kind of what the hell am I trying to think? It's like an animation cell looking kind of thing. And each one has a different piece of the picture on it. So the one at the bottom of the frame is the furthest image back, and you layer them on top of each other. They're all about what looks like, I don't know, an inch apart, maybe a quarter inch apart. And it creates, just by the layered effect, a sort of 3D hierarchy of these images receding down away from you. But when you see the frame on its side, they're quite thick. I don't have anything for scale here from the eBay photo, but several inches high. And but then the trick is when you put it flat and look down on it, it has a really cool kind of, for the time, I would say a pretty cool 3D effect. I got a picture of the Superman one from eBay, but I thought it worked best with a picture they had of a Spider-Man one, the classic Spidey climbing on the wall with his hand extended to shoot a web, John Romita Sr. image. Although the sound effect on that one is just odd. It's whoosh, and he's shooting his webs. I'm like, that doesn't make a whoosh sound. That's thwip. Everybody knows that. but the 3D effect does look pretty cool. So I was kind of surprised to see that ad, which I'm like, man, the drawing's working overtime to make that look cool. I bet these are terrible. And I look at it, and I'm like, no, that's probably pretty cool looking for the time. So there's my 2 spotlighted ads. So we've done it, people. We've done the letters, we've done the story, the cover, we've done many tangents, as many as you want. We could go on more. I'm doing one right now. But what we can do instead is go to a little section of the show we call Got Any Last Words? So for my last words, I'll say, as much as I love Estrada's work in the opener of this issue, I have to admit that Drought and Mitchell do just as good a job in their tale. So it all came down to the writing for me. And that means for me, because I missed the part where the curse explained the big problem I had with the second story. That means Headless Courier brings home the winning trophy this time out. He can tuck it under his other arm that isn't carrying his disattached head.
Redemption for Estrada in a rare World War I story. Blue in the Grave was good, but didn't have a ghost of a chance against Headless Courier. See what I did there? Add an underrated talent on cover and an ad that drew me in on further research, and we have an overall win. It's also the rare issue that doesn't have a World War II tale in it. I'll put this one somewhere high in the middle of the stack.
All right, people, that's the issue. It's time for the scuttlebutt, where I remind you we have an awesome Facebook page, the Weird Warriors Podcast Facebook page, which you think Rich does a lot of work for this show, and he does, because the other option is me. He does a ton of work on the Facebook page. It is a super fun place to hang out, and people actually talk over there. It's not like the tomb that a lot of these other Facebook pages are. There's something going on over there, all right? So head on over there if you're sick of waiting between episodes or whatever, you just feel like shooting the breeze. Rich and the gang are over there for you on the Facebook page. Let us remind you also that the contest to get yourself, not the contest, the offer to get yourself a Sam Star is still out there. Buy any piece of merchandise from us on redbubble.com. Send us a picture of it once it gets to you. You don't have to show us. You don't have to take a picture of yourself. I don't want any pictures of myself on the internet. We're not going to force you to do it either. But show us a picture of the merch, and Rich will send you a certified Sam Star. You know what it is by now. I'm not going to make him get into the whole spiel here. But instead, what I will let him do, again, because he loves giving to all you people, is he's going to give you a teaser for the next episode.
Weird War Tales 57. Death is a Princess. It's a mad, 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 mad world. Another comic I had to buy based on something I discovered in the ads. That gives Max joy. Just be here in a month.
I love it when something else does my work for me. and that's it, people. That's the end of another fantastic, if I do say so myself, episode of the Weird Warriors podcast. And you know, that's what you're listening to, the Weird Warriors podcast. It's hosted by us. Who are we? We're the Batlin Bros. We're the Weird Warriors. This, again, in case you forgot since the last time I mentioned it a few seconds ago, is the Weird Warriors podcast, where we promise to make war
No more.